So in this video I'll show you how you can modify an existing window family, in this case, to give it some added detail. You don't necessarily have to start a family from scratch, although you certainly can if you want to have greater control and understand more fully how all of the components work together and include detail that you think is relevant for your design. But in this case, I'm simply going to add some exterior and interior trim to this window. So if we look at this window now, we can see that it's a very simple window. Not much to it, it's just a fixed window. This is the exterior side, and the other side is the interior side. So I'll go ahead and put some trim on this face here. First thing I'm going to do here is switch to the exterior elevation view so I can see this more easily. So I'll go over to my project browser and look for the elevations. If it's not expanded, expand it, and we will go. Actually, before I do that, I need to open this family. So I'm going to select the window, and then we're going to say Edit Family off the ribbon here. So let's do the first thing first. So now I'm in this file, and if I go to the views, I can see that there's some elevation views, and I want to look at this thing on the exterior side. Right now I'm in the 3D view, so as soon as I switch to a true orthogonal exterior view, you'll see a lot more information here, including the temporary wall that the window cuts the opening for, and all of the reference planes that were created to define the components and align and lock the geometry of this window frame and sash. And the glass as well, probably. So I'm going to go ahead and build some new reference planes in here to start working on this process. So I'll just go to the Create tab, over to the reference plane, and I'm going to make my reference planes a little bit shorter than what you see here already, just so I know they're different. I'm going to use my alignment tab or markers to make sure they work right. This plane here is an existing one. I can utilize that to some extent. So I'm going to go ahead and draw another plane down here, and like this. And then lastly, two short little planes out here, one on this side and one on this side. Even though they're short, I can essentially draw they're infinite in terms of their size, basically, in terms of when I sketch in them. But for now, it's easier for me to see what my planes are as I create them, if I make them up. The appropriate lengths is in this particular view. Now, it's a good idea to name your planes too, in particular if you're going to expect to draw inside of them or use them for some kind of control mechanism. In this case, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start to constrain some of these. So I'm going to go to my Align Dimension tool. And what I want to do is I want to control the width of this exterior trim. So I'm going to select the reference plane and this reference plane here, and do the same thing here. And then do the same thing here. And lastly, I'm going to control the extension of my windowsill with this dimension eventually, and this one here. And then the depth of my windowsill apron as well is something I'm going to want to control. So now that I have these dimensions here, I can go ahead and click on one of them. I can go up to the label and create a new parameter for that. I'll call this one Window Trim. I'm going to make it a type parameter. I click OK. And now I can select these other dimensions as well and apply that parameter to those dimensions as well. So now you can see I've got this parameter here. If I wanted to change it to a different distance, I could type in maybe 0.3.5, and you'll notice that all of those windows now change accordingly. I'll go ahead and select this little sill extension here, and I'll parameterize that. I'll call it sill extension, side extension. And I'll make it a type parameter as well. Click OK, and I'm going to change that to 1 inch. And then likewise, I'll take this one here and apply the sill side extension to it, so you can see it adjusts accordingly. This dimension here is my sill apron, so I'll go ahead and parameterize that. Click OK, and I'll make it something a little more meaningful. I'll make it, maybe I want a larger sill on here. I'll make it 5.5 inches. And then lastly, I want to dimension this area between these two planes here. That will be the thickness of the windowsill itself. And I'm just going to make it a fairly simple one, but Let me go ahead and dimension that one. And I will again parameterize this and call this sill extension. Click sill thickness, not extension. Thickness. And I can parameterize that, maybe make it 2 inches. So you can see everything adjusts accordingly now. So now that I've got all my reference planes in place here, I'm ready to go ahead and start to sketch the objects. But before I do that, I want to actually flex this to make certain that my planes are working the way I expect them to. So I'm going to zoom out a little ways, and I'm going to go to the type family types button up here. I'm going to take a look at the family types here. And right now I have a 24 by 48 inch window here, and I want to just flex it and make certain that things behave as I expect them to. So let's change it to a 16 inch wide by 24 inch high window. Click apply, and you can see that everything flexes and everything stays as I expect it to for the most part. Let's try another one. Apply. Everything looks like it's behaving as I expect it to for the most part. So I don't see any issues here with this. I can probably go ahead and start to drop my model in here. I see my sill side extensions are changing. I'm not too worried about that right now. I'll actually fix that when I get into the actual creation on this thing. So yeah, I'm also seeing some other things change, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about that because I can adjust and provide the values inside here when we get to that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start to sketch here. So let me go back to a smaller window so I can see this more easily. Let me go back to the 24 by 48 probably. Okay, so this was the original one that I was working with, so everything's as I expect it to be. So now I want to go ahead and create my actual window trim. So I'll go to the Create tab, and I need to set a working plane. So I'm going to click the Set button here for the work plane. And then I'm going to use the Pick a Plane option. I'm going to zoom out so I can see the whole wall, and I'm going to move to the exterior face of this wall and click on it. That now becomes my sketch plane. And now I want to go ahead and create my extrusion shape. So I'll select the extrusion tool. And I'm going to, rather than draw it and then align and lock it to the planes, instead I'm going to just use the pick line tool, and real importantly I'm going to make certain that this button here that says lock on the option bar is selected. This will speed things up for me, as you'll see. So now I can go through here and click on the different planes, and you'll notice it will lock them to that plane immediately, so I don't have to use the align and lock tool. So I want to pick this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. My apron's going to be the same size basically, so I'm going to pick this one here, and then this one here. That'll take care of that. My sill stops here, so I'm going to click on this one here as well. Now I want to start to trim this thing up a little bit, so I'll use my TR alias or shortcut, keyboard shortcut, to trim up these window boards here. And let's see, I want to go down to here like this initially. And then I'm going to use my split line tool. I'm going to split this one here and split this one here and split this one here. And now I can go back to trim and trim these up accordingly. And I'll pause when I get these trimmed so you can see what this looks like. There we go. So now you can see that I've got all of my 3 sides of my windows, my 2 style sides and then the rail side, or the jam sides and the head side, all trimmed out accordingly, and then the apron down here at the sill is trimmed out the way I want it to be as well. And I've just aligned these. So that should work pretty well. Now what I'm going to do is, to make certain that everything works, I'm going to go ahead and finish this sketch right now. So I'm going to click the check mark. And now you can see those are all of my parts so far. And again, what I'm going to do before I go too far is just flex it a little bit. So I'm just going to change to maybe a 24 by 24 inch window, click apply, and see what happens. And you can see things look to me like they're behaving reasonably well. Again, I can go in here and change these values in a little bit for each one of these different types as I want to. Okay, so that looks like it's okay. Next thing I want to get is the actual sill. So let me go back to the window I'm used to working on here. I think that was the 24 by 48. Apply, click OK. Now I want to sketch the sill inside of here. I'm going to take care of the thickness on all of these things in a moment here, but for now all I want to do is get the sill. So again, I'm going to create an extrusion. My working plane should still be the same, but if you're unsure, you can always click Set and pick a plane and check it again if you need to. And now I can again use pick line, and I'm going to pick this line here, because lock is still selected, I'm good to go. This line here, and then this plane here. Again, I'll trim those out. Trim this to this, this to this, this to this, and this to this. That all looks good to me. Click check. And now I want to look at this thing three-dimensionally, and you'll notice that by default, probably the extrusions on those are really big. And usually 1 foot is the default extrusion size. So what I want to do now is control the thickness on this. So I'm going to go to one of the side views. Doesn't matter which one. I'll go to the left side view. So now I can see here's the face of my wall, and then here's the thickness on the extrusion. I'll again go to Create, Reference Plane. I'll put a reference plane out here like this. And then what I will do is I will parameterize that. So I'll go to here, pick the face of the wall as my element that I want to dimension from, and then this plane here, and select it, parameterize it, and we will call it trim thickness. If I want to be consistent here, I should probably say window. It might even be good to say window exterior trim thickness. So name your parameters accordingly, so when you go to modify those, you know what it is. Window exterior trim, just to make it clear. And then I can click OK. And now I can take this and then just drag the handle back to that plane and then lock it. So there's a situation where I actually would, I don't know if that lock hit. Let me try that again. Drop it here and lock it. There we go. There was another grip there that I think it selected. So that takes care of that. What I can do for this is a couple different things. I could, of course, do another plane here, or if I knew that I always wanted this to project a certain distance, like 1 inch out, I could create a parameter that controls that without having to do a reference plane as much, and I'll show you how you can do that. I'll go to my parameter family types here, and then you'll notice there's a button down here that allows you to create new parameters here. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to call this parameter the sill projection distance. And it's going to be a type as well, and I'll just click OK. So now you can see that there's a new parameter in the family here. It doesn't exist on a dimension anywhere. That's okay. Parameters can reside like that. And for the distance, I'm going to put in a formula instead. So for the formula here, I'm going to actually use 1 inch plus the thickness of the trim. So I have to make certain I get this correct. So I want to type in window, oops, has to match exactly the syntax of this one here. So there's a situation where you might want to be careful about how you name things. Window exterior trim thickness has to match exactly, plus 1 inch. Okay, you don't need to type in the feet, just make sure you get the inch symbol in there, and you can see Revit's going to go ahead and take care of that for me. So now if I want to, while I'm here, I can actually fix some of these dimensions. So I'm going to say the window exterior trim thickness is going to be maybe 1.5 inches. I can go in here and change my window trim thickness as well. Where are you at? Window trim to 3.5, that's good. The window inset, that's fine. Those are parameters that were determined by the family previously. So I'm okay with that one for this window. I'm going to click Apply and OK. And now what I want to do is take this object here and actually apply that to it. So you'll notice here this was an extrusion. So the extrusion start was at the 0 plane, which was the face of the wall. And what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to click on this button here and say that's actually going to be the window projection distance value, and click, or the window sill projection distance value. Click OK, and now you can see there's the trim thickness plus the 1 inch here. So you can use parameters to drive things as well by using these buttons here and selecting the parameters off of the list of available parameters that you have in your project. So now this should work pretty well. It would be a smart idea really to go through here and take a look at each one of these and make certain all of these numbers are what I expect them to be. If not, this is where I would adjust them to make certain that they're correct. Then it's ready to load into your project basically. So that's how you can address the exterior side of the window, and now you can see that would essentially be what this window type would look like. And again, if I picked a different type, you would see that these numbers would change depending upon how I had set the parameters within it. And it should flex fine, but you may have to go through there and adjust each one of those parameters so that the values are what you expect them to be for each one of the different types. So next thing I'll do is I'll show you how we can put a trim on the back side of this, on the interior of this window. So what I'm going to do in this case is a slightly different approach. I'm just going to use a sweep to do a picture frame, like a 45 mitered picture frame around this object. So I will go to my Create tab again, and this time I'm going to say let's do a sweep. And I'm going to do a little bit different technique this time. I'm simply going to pick the three-dimensional lines based on the geometry that's in my drawing to use. So I'll just use the pick line tool here for the path. I'll select this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. That's on the window frame as it cuts into the wall opening. And you'll get this little green sketch plane here. That's the very first one that you pick. So just be aware that's the first line you pick is where this sketch plane will be. So now I need to sketch inside of this plane. So I want to look at it from the side view. So I'll go to either the left or the right. It doesn't matter which one. And now I can see here's the origin point for my profile, and now I have to either sketch or load a profile or use one on here if there isn't one already loaded. So I'm fine with my 3D edge, so I'm going to click check. I'm done with my 3D edge, and here's where I could actually load a profile if I wanted to. So I'll just go ahead and load one. If I wanted to freehand sketch one, I would use this button here, and then I could freehand sketch it. Be aware that this is the corner of the bottom of it in this view here. So I'll load a profile instead. So I'll just go to Load Profile to show you how this works. What I want to do is I want to find a profile to load. I'm going to go to a place where I know I have some, and I believe they're in here. Let me see. Do I have it in here? No, it's in the class folder, which isn't on here. Okay, so I don't have them in here. Maybe under TM Cobb, although that's a door manufacturer. All right, so I don't have my profiles in here. Let's just go ahead and grab one from Revit's Imperial Library here. Let's see if we can find one in the Imperial Library here. So I'm just going to go down here to Profiles, and we'll look under Finish Carpentry, and we will grab a profile here that looks like, let's find something. I want a crown molding. Ideally, casing profile. Here, we'll use this casing profile right here. Okay, so open. Again, a lot of times you can actually obtain these Revit profiles from manufacturers. If not, you can bring in an image from a catalog and simply sketch it for yourself, and then save it as a Revit family inside it, using the Revit profile template starting point when you create a new family for it. So here I want to drop this down and tell it what I'm using now. So there you can see is the profile I've just loaded. It's backwards, so I have to flip it. So I'm going to click the flip button here. And now I have to rotate it. So I'm going to give it a rotation of 180 degrees. And now you can see it's in the correct orientation. However, I need this point here on the molding to overlap the frame by a little bit. So I'm just going to use my Move tool now, and I can take this profile and move it from here up to about here. So now you can see if you look at the window frame here, it's overlapping a little bit. That's enough, maybe a little bit more. And this is where you could dimension it and place it real accurately if you wanted to. You could also type in the values up here. So if you know exactly you want it to be 3 1/4 inches here, you could type in that value too. But I'm just eyeballing it for purposes of what I'm doing here. Now I'm going to click check. Now if you look at this thing three-dimensionally, you can see we now have a picture frame molding on the outside of our building. It might be smart to actually, as you're working on these things, let me go back to edit this sweep, to actually select the objects as you're working on them and apply a subcategory to them so that you could then more easily apply that into the materials to it inside of the project. And as a reminder, to get to that, you can type in VG. You can go to the object style button here, and then you can see the window right now has all of these. So if I wanted to make a new for my exterior trim, I could click new subcategory. I could type in exterior trim material, click OK, and then oops, that's part of walls. I want to delete that there. Yes, I want to select Windows and click New for Windows, and now type in exterior trim material and click OK. And now you'll notice it's blank right now, but in the project, when you go to your project files, once this is inserted, if you go to the Windows section, you will now have a subcategory called exterior trim material. You have to get it through the sub-object or the object styles dialog box to get it to show properly, and then you could pick whatever material you want it to be here and apply that throughout the entire project. I'll click Apply, click OK. Click OK. So now you can see if I select these two components here, I can actually come to the subcategory here and say it's part of the exterior trim material. Apply. All right, so that's one way you can ease the making of materials as you're working on objects. Let me see, subcategory here, I could do the same thing, exterior trim material. And that's where you probably have a separate one for interior. I'm not going to make that though. I just want to be able to control this quickly and easily and show you that the same thing applies for this one as well. Okay. So now that I'm done with this, it would be a good idea actually to potentially rename this with a new window name as a new family that had window with trim or something. And then load it into your project and then place it or replace the existing windows. But in this case, since I already have a name on this thing, it's called Fixed RFA, I'm simply going to load this back into my project. That's where we started this assignment, and I'm going to say overwrite the existing version and its parameters, and now you can see I have the new window here for me to use in the project, and you can see the window picture trim on that side. And if I wanted to, I could select this, and then you'll notice there are no real parameters inside of the properties for me to edit on this. But if I wanted to change, say, the size or the thickness of the trim, here's where I would go to Edit Type, and then inside of here is all of the information that I can edit, and this would apply globally to all of the family types of the same type within the family throughout the project. So this is where you would change things. To get to the actual materials to apply to these, you want to go to VG, Object Styles, and then remember this was a window family, so if you go down here to Windows, you can see that here is now my exterior trim material. I could click on here, and then I could apply a material to this. I'll just go ahead and type in paint and just select this clad white. Click Apply, click OK, click OK. And now if I were to look at this thing in a shaded view, you can see that my trim material, both on the outside of the building and on the inside of the building, is that clad white material. Notice the window here isn't, so if I wanted to make this window match, I could go to Edit Type. Inside of here is the sash material that the window is currently using. If I wanted it, so it's handled a little bit differently. If I wanted to assign the material to this one, I could do it right from here. So I'm just going to type in paint clad. I think that's what its name was. Nope, that's not it. So let's go here and do that again. Paint. Oh, it's clad white. Apply it, okay. And now you can see I have what look like white clad vinyl or fiberglass or I suppose aluminum windows to some extent with a trim around the whole thing. That's it. I hope that explains to you how you can customize your own windows and change them and make them work for you as you're working in Revit.